My name is Emily, and I will never forget the morning that taught me how fragile and unpredictable life really is. It should have been a simple day, ordinary even, except for the fact that I had been anticipating it for weeks. The clock on my nightstand glowed 5:30 a.m. in soft green letters, and even before my alarm went off, I was awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional groan of pipes in the old apartment building. I had been too restless to sleep properly. My suitcase sat by the door, packed and repacked 2 nights before, each shirt folded neatly as though tidiness could somehow keep my nerves under control. My passport had been checked at least 3 times, and my flight confirmation email sat starred in my inbox like a beacon, daring me not to forget. This wasn't just a trip. It was a chance to bridge a chasm I had let grow wider with time. I was flying to see my sister, Rachel, for the first time in nearly 3 years. 3 years of silence, interrupted only by the occasional birthday text or holiday card. 3 years of missed opportunities, of moments where I had thought about calling but hadn't, of days when anger turned to stubbornness and stubbornness hardened into silence. It wasn't as though we had fought about anything catastrophic. No betrayal, no shouted words that couldn't be taken back, just distance. She had her world, her husband, her children, her responsibilities, and I had mine. My career, my excuses, my pride. Our last phone call had ended with a pause that stretched too long, words that came out clumsy, and a silence so heavy that I had carried it with me like baggage. But now, with this flight, I had chosen to try. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my hair with deliberate strokes. The woman staring back at me looked more vulnerable than I expected. Dark circles under her eyes, lips pressed tight. I adjusted the collar of my blouse, exhaled, and whispered to my reflection almost like a prayer. Don't be late, Emily. Don't mess this up. The city outside was already stirring. Through the thin curtains, I could hear vendors shouting about fresh bread, buses sighing awake, footsteps of neighbors heading off to their own destinations. I grabbed my suitcase handle, locked the door behind me, and felt a weight in my chest. Not dread exactly, but something heavy and nameless. Excitement, yes, but threaded with a strange unease. It felt as though the day had already decided to teach me something, though I had no idea what. The taxi driver arrived 10 minutes after I called, his yellow cab pulling up with a squeak of brakes. He was a cheerful man, with a face browned and creased by the sun, his baseball cap frayed at the edges. His smile felt practiced, yet genuine, as though carved from equal parts hardship and humor. "Airport?" he asked as I climbed into the back seat, adjusting the rearview mirror to see me. "Yes," I said, then added quickly, "but I need to stop at Central Station first. I'm taking the express train from there. It's faster." "Good choice," he said with a nod, starting the meter. "Traffic this morning is already building. You'd be stuck for hours otherwise." The cab rumbled through the waking streets. I pressed my forehead lightly against the window, watching familiar buildings glide by as if they belonged to someone else's life. The bakery on the corner was already open, the scent of warm bread trailing into the street. A woman with a briefcase hurried past, balancing a cup of coffee and a phone at her ear. But my thoughts weren't on them. They were on Rachel. Memories surfaced without warning. The two of us as children crammed into the backseat of our parents' car during road trips. Rachel with her nose in a book, reading out loud in an exaggerated voice just to annoy me. Me pretending to hate it, though secretly loving the way her voice carried over the hum of the road. We had been inseparable once, each other's shadows. The driver's voice pulled me from the memory. "Visiting family?" he asked casually. "Yes," I said, softly. "It's been a while." He caught my eyes in the mirror. There was a weight in his look, a kind of wisdom that comes only with age. "Don't wait too long to fix things. Sometimes time doesn't wait for us." The word struck deeper than he could have known. I carried them with me like stones in my pocket as the taxi merged into traffic, then finally slowed in front of the massive, bustling central station. I paid him, thanked him, and wheeled my suitcase into the grand hall where chaos already reigned. The station was alive in a way that made me both excited and uneasy. The smell of coffee and diesel hung in the air. Suitcases clicked across the tiled floor like impatient heels. Announcements echoed above in a mechanical voice, cold and precise. A man brushed past me, muttering into his phone. A child tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing at a pastry case with pleading eyes. I glanced up at the towering departure screen. My train to the airport? Platform 7. Departure in 15 minutes. Perfect timing. I exhaled, clutching the handle of my suitcase a little tighter, ready to weave through the crowd toward the platform. And that's when I saw him. The crowd flowed around me like water around a stone. Businessmen in press suits, tourists dragging brightly colored luggage, students with backpacks slung over one shoulder. Everyone seemed to have a purpose, a destination, a hurry that made them blind to everything else. But my eyes fixed on him. An old man stood near the ticket machines, bent almost double by the weight of a massive suitcase that leaned awkwardly to one side. His back was stooped, his hair white as a winter field, and his hands trembled as he tried to steady the case upright. It toppled again with a dull thud, narrowly missing the heel of a passing commuter. People glanced, frowned, and then moved on, as though his trouble was an inconvenience rather than a cry for help. I hesitated. My first instinct was to keep walking. My train was leaving in 15 minutes. My flight was waiting on the other side of that flight. If I stopped, even for a moment, I might risk being late. But then I saw his hands, thin, veined, trembling with the simple effort of holding onto the suitcase handle. His jaw clenched in quiet frustration, and for a second, I imagined my father. What if it were him, alone in a station, ignored by strangers rushing past? Something inside me shifted. I pulled my suitcase closer and walked toward him. "Excuse me," I said gently. "Do you need some help?" He looked up, startled, his eyes pale and watery. For a moment, they searched mine, as though unsure whether I was real or just another passerby about to disappear. Then he nodded, his voice frail but steady. This bag, it's heavier than I thought." I bent down and grabbed the handle. The weight nearly pulled my arm from its socket. My eyebrows shot up. "What do you have in here, bricks?" I joked, trying to lighten the mood. His lips curved into a faint smile. "Memories," he said softly. "That's all it really is." The words made me pause. They hung in the air between us, heavier than the suitcase itself. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Platform 12, the coastal train. Brighton." Brighton. The name tugged at me. Half-forgotten summers by the sea when Anna and I were girls, our parents spreading blankets across the pebbled beach. I hadn't thought of that place in years. "Well then," I said, adjusting my grip on his suitcase, "let's get you there." We began walking slowly, his cane tapping rhythmically against the tiles beside me. He walked with small, deliberate steps, as though each one was a victory. People brushed past us in the rush, but he didn't seem to notice. He carried himself with the calm of someone who stopped measuring life by the minute. "My wife used to pack this bag for me," he said, after a while, his voice carrying the weight of memory. "She could fit everything nicely. Made even the heaviest loads feel lighter." I glanced at him. His eyes softened, though his lips trembled slightly. "She passed away last year. I've been learning how to carry things on my own again." The word struck me deep in the chest. I swallowed, unsure what to say, afraid that any attempt at comfort would sound hollow. "I'm sorry," I murmured. He nodded, as though accepting not just my sympathy, but the silence that followed. "She loved Brighton," he said, after a pause. "We honeymooned there. Every year, on her birthday, we'd go back. Today would have been her 72nd. My throat tightens. Suddenly, the suitcase didn't feel like leather and zippers. It felt like grief, made tangible, like decades of laughter and love now condensed into weight. "That's beautiful," I whispered. He gave me a small smile. "Memories are heavier than we think, but they're worth carrying." We walked on, weaving through the chaos of the station. A young couple brushed past us, laughing, their voices sharp and carefree. A man shouted into his phone. A child cried. Yet around us it felt as if time slowed. By the time we reached his platform, I was sweating, my arms aching, but his gratitude radiated so clearly that I almost forgot my own urgency. He turned to me, extending a hand that trembled slightly, but held surprising strength. "Thank you, young lady. Most people don't stop anymore. They're too busy running." I checked my watch and felt my stomach plummet. My train, boarding now. "I really have to go," I said quickly. He nodded, eyes kind. "Go, and thank you." I squeezed his hand once more, then bolted down the corridor, dragging my suitcase behind me. The platform came into view. My train was still there. My heart surged with relief. "Wait!" I shouted, waving my ticket as I ran. But the doors slid shut in my face. "No, no, please!" The train began to move, gliding away with mechanical indifference. I pounded once on the glass, breathless, my voice drowned by the squeal of wheels against rails. And then it was gone. I stood frozen, chest heaving, ticket trembling in my hand. The departure board glowed above me with cruel precision. Next train, 30 minutes. 30 minutes too late. By then, my flight would already be boarding. I staggered back to a bench and collapsed, my suitcase bumping against the tiles. The station swirled around me in motion and noise, but I felt hollow, as though the ground had opened beneath me. Why hadn't I just walked past him? Why did I always let myself get distracted? I pressed my palms against my eyes, frustration burning hot. Maybe kindness wasn't always worth the cost. But even as the thought formed, it felt wrong. I pictured his pale eyes, the way his voice softened when he spoke of Brighton, of his wife, that suitcase full of memories. The train was gone, yes, but could I have lived with myself if I had turned away? By the time I finally reached the airport, sweat soaked the back of my blouse. My suitcase wheels rattled against the tiled floors as I sprinted toward the gate, hope clinging by a thread. But when I arrived, the gate was closed. "Please," I begged the attendant, clutching my ticket. "I had a delay, but I'm here now. Can't you let me through?" Her smile was practiced, polite, utterly unyielding. "I'm sorry, ma'am, the plane has already begun taxiing. There's nothing we can do." Her words sliced cleanly through me. I staggered back, dropped into a chair near the window, and stared out as the plane I should have been on rolled down the runway. My chest felt like it was caving in. All my careful planning, all my promises to myself, it had all unraveled because of one choice. I pressed my palms against my eyes, frustration burning hot. Maybe kindness wasn't always worth the cost. But even as the thought formed, it felt wrong. I pictured his pale eyes, the way his voice softened when he spoke of Brighton, of his wife, that suitcase full of memories. The train was gone, yes, But could I have lived with myself if I had turned away? My phone buzzed in my pocket. Her name lit the screen. I hesitated, my throat tight. Then I answered. "Emily, are you on your way?" she asked, her voice hopeful, fragile. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Before I could speak, an announcement crackled through the airport speakers. The robotic voice was different this time. Shaky. Uncertain. Something about an emergency landing. Something about diverted flights. I froze. My phone buzzed again, Anna's voice urgent now. "Emily, are you okay? The flight you were supposed to be on, it had to make an emergency landing in another city. They said there was smoke in the cabin. Everyone's safe, but..." Her words blurred as shock washed over me. The plane I had missed, the one that I had cursed myself over, had nearly become a nightmare. I sank back into the chair, hand pressed against my chest. For the first time that day, my tears finally came. Missing that flight hadn't been a punishment. It had been protection. Hours later, waiting for another flight, I couldn't stop thinking about the old man. His trembling hands, his suitcase full of memories, the way fate had placed him directly in my path, just long enough to change everything. Maybe I was meant to help him. Maybe I was meant to miss that train. I closed my eyes and whispered a thank you, not just to fate, but to him. When I finally reached Anna's house, it was late. She opened the door, her eyes tired but warm. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I told her everything about the old man, the missed train, the flight I hadn't boarded, the emergency landing. For the first time in years, we didn't argue. She just listened, her hand wrapped around mine, her eyes wet with tears. "Maybe life gave you a second chance," she said softly, and I believed her. Now, whenever I find myself rushing, consumed by deadlines, schedules, and the pressure of being on time, I remember that day. I remember the old man's trembling hands, his suitcase full of memories, the way fate had placed him directly in my path, just long enough to change everything. Maybe I was meant to help him. Maybe I was meant to miss that train. I closed my eyes and whispered a thank you, not just to fate, but to him. When I finally reached Anna's house, it was late. She opened the door, her eyes tired but warm. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I told her everything about the old man, the missed train, the flight I hadn't boarded, the emergency landing. For the first time in years, we didn't argue. She just listened, her hand wrapped around mine, her eyes wet with tears. "Maybe life gave you a second chance," she said softly, and I believed her. Now, whenever I find myself rushing, consumed by deadlines, schedules, and the pressure of being on time, I remember that day. I remember the old man's trembling hands, his suitcase full of memories, not with clothes, but with memories. I remember the sting of the train doors closing in my face. I remember watching the plane I thought I needed to be on lift into the sky without me, only to learn later that fate had spared me from what could have been disaster. And I remember my sister's face when I finally stood before her, not with excuses, but with honesty. Life has a strange way of guiding us, of slowing us down, of placing people in our path at the very moment we need them most. Sometimes the delays, the detours, the missed opportunities are not punishments at all, but protection. And kindness, it is never wasted. The moral of the story is, sometimes life delays us not to punish us, but to protect us. And no matter the cost, choose kindness. I've been listening to this story on Polygon of Lies. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to follow for more stories like this.